Hi guys, it's Frankie from Frankie Tech. Good to see you guys again, and I'm here to share my Antutu throttling test between the Mi 10T Pro, the iPhone 12, and the OnePlus 8T. Now, if you haven't seen one of these before on the channel, what I will do is basically not one, not two, but 6 Antutu tests in a row on these devices. I will be checking the temperatures of these phones as I do it, and I'll also be using this thermometer to check the ambient temps of these phones. Now, taking a quick note of the battery life of these phones, 99%, the iPhone is at 91, and the OnePlus 8T was just charged at 100. So let's also see how much of a battery drain this extreme test will have on these phones. Now, I've tested phones with the Snapdragon 865 before, like this Mi 10T Pro, and the OnePlus 8T I think should do a solid job, but the real question mark in this test is this iPhone 12. How is it going to survive this most extreme of Antutu tests here on the channel? Let's have a look. Alright guys, so here we are, and I've switched to full HD recording here because this is going to be a very long file, uninterrupted. I'm going to be testing these phones, and I will be using the Pixel 4a here just to keep track of time as well. This test should take about 1 hour to complete. So let's get started with the first Antutu test on these phones. In 3, 2, 1, let's go. Testing. So here we go guys, round 1 of this Antutu throttling test. Alright, and here we are, test 1 completed, and we see the results of these phones, 578,000, 555, and 571. And now checking the CPU monitor, at least on the Android phones, 38 degrees, 41 on the OnePlus 8T, and now measuring the ambient temperature of these phones, 36.9, 36.6, and 37.3. But let's not waste any time now, we go into round 2. Here we go, test number 2. Alright guys, so here we are done with test number 2, and we have some very interesting results here. 577,000 on the Mi 10T Pro, 572 on the OnePlus 8T. They've held their own, but look at this. The iPhone 12 has dropped pretty dramatically here, even after the second test, 507,000. Checking the CPU monitors on these phones, 42 degrees and 43 degrees. Measuring the actual temperatures of the devices, 39.6, 37.3, and 39.5. So clearly the iPhone is not liking this test, but sorry iPhone, we're gonna have to do this again. Here we go, test number 3 on these phones. Okay, here we are done with test number 3. And look at these scores, 572, 571, but the iPhone 12 once again dipped a little bit lower, but it's holding at around 504,000. Now checking the CPU temps, 45 degrees, 44 degrees Celsius on the Android phones. And the actual ambient temperatures, 42.3, 38.1, and 41.3. Here we go, test number 4 on these phones. Alright, here we go, test number 4 completed, and now we finally see a slight dip here on the Mi 10T Pro, 557, just a couple of thousands of points, but here's the iPhone 12 at 497,000. Looks like the OnePlus 8T is holding its own here the best. Look at the CPU temps, 46 degrees, 46, 45, and check the ambient temps, 42.2, 38.4, there we see it, and 42.5. So I think what we're seeing here, guys, is that the iPhone is not getting as hot, but I think that is because the A14 Bionic is throttling here, and that is why we're seeing these numbers go lower and lower. And here we go, test number 5 on these phones. Alright, here's test number 5 completed, and now we see the real challenge starting to come to the OnePlus 8T. 546,000 on the Mi 10T Pro, 494 for the iPhone 12, definitely throttling now, and the OnePlus 8T has now dipped into the low 500,000s. Checking the CPU temps on these phones, 45 degrees, and let's check the ambient temps as well. 42.5, 38.1, 41.6. So these phones are really struggling now with this test, but let's do it here one last time. The final test here on all these phones. Here we go. And so that's it, guys. Test number 6 completed. And I don't know if you noticed it there, but the Mi 10T Pro actually finished last this time. But with a score of 549,000, it stayed closest to its original score from the start. Meanwhile, the iPhone 12, 460,000. So a near 100,000 point drop from test number 1. And the OnePlus 8T, I think, did a pretty solid job. 522,000. Looking at the CPU temps, 47 degrees, 45, 46 for these phones. And now checking the ambient temps one last time. You see high, that means that it's past 45 degrees. It will not offer a measurement if it's past that. 38.3 and 41.6 on the OnePlus 8T. So that's it for the testing, and now let's talk about these results. And stopping the clock at 63 minutes, what can this Antutu Throttling Test tell us about these phones? Well, in the case of the Mi 10T Pro and the OnePlus 8T, I think these phones did a pretty solid job, but they did get very hot. You see here, even still, they are pretty warm, but they did not lower their scores as much. Because of the larger size of these phones, and despite these really high temperatures, they did not throttle as much. But the iPhone 12, on the other hand, was a completely different story. This phone never surpassed 40 degrees Celsius in any of the temperature checks that I did on this phone. And yet, despite that, the A14 Bionic is definitely throttling here on this phone. But the other thing maybe you noticed as well was that the iPhone 12 did finish this test around 1 minute faster than these other phones did every single time. I do still believe the A14 Bionic is probably, just on a CPU basis, the more powerful chipset, but I think the threshold for how hot Apple lets the iPhone get is much lower, and I think as a result, that is why we saw such major drops in the scores for the iPhone 12. And if we're gonna pick a winner here, just based on which phone stayed closest to the original score, I'm gonna give it here to the Mi 10T Pro. It definitely got the hottest, but if you're going to be doing some intense gaming on this phone, my experience is that this phone hangs in there, and despite getting extremely hot, it will not throttle under extreme loads like this Antutu Throttling Test. And you could say the big loser of this test is the iPhone 12, and it is clearly proving that the A14 Bionic, while powerful, is definitely throttling. I think the OnePlus 8T also did a solid job as well. And also, guys, just quickly mentioning the battery drain of these phones, 77%, 77%. So both the Mi 10T Pro and the OnePlus 8T basically dropped around 23% in this test. And the iPhone 12 dropped to 65, which means it basically dropped 26% in this test. I actually thought the iPhone 12 would drop even more than that, so this result is actually pretty good for this phone, but clearly these two phones did the better job here, only dropping 23% in this 1 hour of Antutu testing. But hit me up in the comments. Which of these phones do you think won out? I think it was pretty close between the Mi 10T Pro and the OnePlus 8T. But either way, hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, give me that thumbs up. And if you love the content of Frankie Tech, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon for future updates. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more great content here, as always, on Frankie Tech. And this is where I leave you by saying, this is Frankie Tech, signing off. Have a good one.